Hello. Oklahoma's made it in the news again, and not in a good way. Yeah, I'm going to go there. Ryan Walters, Oklahoma school superintendent, the head of all the schools. Scandal after scandal after scandal. First, it's calling all the teachers groomers, deciding he's going to take all the books out of the classrooms that have anything to do with the LGBTQI community or with emphasizing the strengths of the Black people or anything non-Christian. He's going to put the 10 Commandments in every classroom, every hallway. He's going to have thousands of Trump Bibles put into every classroom across Oklahoma, and they're going to be taught as part of the curriculum in every class, no matter what it is about. Yeah. Now, white supremacist, conservative evangelical Christian man is not smart enough to turn his TV off before he makes a Zoom call to other superintendents and people in the government dealing with education and gets caught watching porn. Totally against Christian values. You never see this happening. Somebody who is a member of the LGBTQIA community assaulting a child, abusing children, sexualizing children. You never see them getting arrested for child rape. It's like 0.1% of all the people that are in the prisons for any reason are non-Christian. So I'm talking pagans and atheists and and anybody in the LGBTQ community that's in jail that's not a Christian. It's always white men, Christian white men, Christian white men in the clergy that are getting arrested for sexual abuse of minors, children, infants. What is it about Christianity that people can call themselves followers of Jesus Christ, and yet they don't do one bloody thing that Jesus taught? And they can be all in denial. And you catch them at it, and they'll double down and say, oh, well, if it happened, it didn't really happen. I don't understand how that could have gone on. I'm not in control over what goes on my TV. Bullshit. Ryan Walters, you are the biggest hypocrite. And we here in Oklahoma do not appreciate what you're trying to do. It's bad enough you're ignoring the separation of church and state. It's bad enough that you're forcing your brand of Christianity down everybody in schools, the children, the teachers. You forget that there are lots of different religions practiced in Oklahoma, not just Christianity and not just your flavor of the month Christianity. A school is supposed to be a place where you get your education in the things that are going to enable you to prosper out in the world financially, to get you a job, the things that you need to know to get you a job so that you can work and make your own way. Now, church, your religious institution, is where you're supposed to learn about religious things. And public schools are funded by the state. There's a wall between the church and state, according to our Constitution of the United States of America. Now, I try very hard not to come across as the angry pagan, because for most of my life, from the time I was born until I was in my late 20s, before I started deconstructing, I was a Christian. I was believing and living my life according to what I was being taught that a good old Christian girl should do. I read my Bible and still read my Bible, but I read it cover to cover, cover to cover, at least once a year. From the time I was old enough to read a Bible, I was about 5. I had a children's Bible, but I also had a regular Bible. Read my regular Bible. From the time I was 5 or 6, I read it cover to cover. I studied it. I prayed daily, almost without ceasing. The situation I grew up in was horrendous, and I was always praying to God to make it stop, to make things better. God never answered. Things did not get better. But I still prayed. I went to church Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night. And then when I got into my first marriage, it wasn't just the 3-4 times a week. It was every time they had a cotton picking meeting. I sang with the city choir when we had the big revivals. I went out and I testified. They wanted us to go out and witness to people. Well, I tried that. I couldn't. I didn't like preaching at people. It just didn't sit right with me. And the more I read my Bible, the more I realized But that's not what Jesus told us to do. What he told us to do when he told us to be a witness to his works was to live according to his teachings, to love, to not be judgmental. And by our life, be such an example of what he was that people would want to know him. And then we could talk to him about it. I left the preaching for the pastors in the church and the street preachers that I grew to absolutely hate, because they would follow you around all over town preaching at you if they decided that they didn't like your look, or they listened in on a conversation you were having with somebody and decided that they had to get their 2 cents in on it. So they would follow you around and they would preach at you and tell you how horrible you were and how you were going to burn in hell. And then, as part of my deconstruction, I studied Judaism, intending to go back to what Jesus lived, because Jesus was a Jew. So I was going to try. And I studied in various pagan faiths. I studied what they were like. Eventually, I became an Omniest Pagan, because I realized that all religions have validity. All religions, all deities, they have the same validity. And even those who are atheists and agnostics, they have just as much validity. And so I became an Omniest. I'm very accepting of people who worship differently than I do, who follow different faiths. I don't try to make them be what I am. I don't persecute people because they're Christian. I don't persecute people because they're Muslim or whatever. I do call that bad behavior. People don't like Christians because they're Christians. They don't like Christians because they call themselves Christians and do horrible, horrible things and act like they're allowed to get away with it because they're under grace and not under the law. But then they turn around and they look at you and they point fingers and say, you're this horrible person and you do this and this and this and this. And that's not what Jesus taught. That's not what the Bible says. So what did Jesus say about homosexuality? Zilch. What did he say about adultery? He said men needed to quit looking at women with lust in their heart. Because when a man does that, he's committed adultery just as surely as if he did the deed himself. Didn't say anything about women. He said it was the men's fault. He said to quit trying to put the blame on the woman. That's what he said about adultery. What did Jesus say about the immigrants, the poor? Well, he said to love them. He said to treat them with kindness. He said that when you do things to the least of these, you're doing it to him. How does that fit with Ryan Walters and what he's doing? See, I don't need to preach at people. But I can say this. that if you're cruel to someone who is homeless or poor or a member of the LGBTQ community or they're an immigrant, a foreigner, that's the least of these. If you're cruel to them, you're cruel to Jesus. If you show love and compassion to them, then you're showing love to Jesus. That's what Jesus taught. That's what's in the Bible. And if you don't believe me, you can pick it up. You can open it up. Find where Jesus was talking about how you treat the poor and the homeless and the alien in your country. And you find where he was talking about adultery. And then you figure out, was Ryan Walters being a Christian or was he not? And that's really all I got to say on that subject. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.